Thank you so much for this signal honor. I am deeply moved and, as I told the Chancellor, encouraged to try to live up to even a small percentage of what you have said and what this honor means. President Parr Johnston, Chancellor, and Board of Governors, administrators, faculty, alumni, students, all who are here in this auditorium, and all of the people of Nova Scotia and Canada who support this university and understand its mission. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to be with you. I am pleased to be joined by our ambassador to your country, Ambassador Blanchard, and his wife, and I am pleased personally to be here in Halifax and in Nova Scotia and back again in Canada. I am very fond of your country. I have had many pleasant times starting as a child when I would visit with my family and with my husband, and on occasions when business brought me here. I never knew, however, that probably one of the most famous photographs that I would ever have taken of me would reach around the entire world when I went skating in Ottawa on the canal. I showed up some weeks later in South Asia, and people were showing me pictures of myself skating and asking me what it was like to skate, since they could not even imagine how cold that could be. So my times here have been very enjoyable for me, and I am pleased that you are hosting this G7 summit here. I also had the occasion, as we ferried across the water on the Coast Guard cutter that took us from the airport to Halifax, to learn something that is of great significance to me and others who have resided where I do, and that is that General Ross, who commanded the British troops during the war that we call the War of 1812, that was responsible for burning the President's house, is buried near here. And I must say that that is extraordinarily meaningful to us, and if any of you have ever had the opportunity to visit what was then called the President's house, I hope you have noticed that we left one portion of the wall as you enter the front, not painted white, but the original color of the stone with the burn marks still showing. So for me, this was an extraordinary historical fact. So we also, in a funny way, owe the White House, because it had to be painted white to cover the burn marks, to all of you. I am also newly informed that those who live in Halifax are called Haligonians. Now, I hope I was rightly informed, because I think that is the most remarkable word, and I intend to use it many, many times. I feel very much at home here at the Mount. And part of that must be because your president and I share similar educational backgrounds. Both of us graduated from Wellesley College, which is located in what you call the Boston States. And then we went on to Yale to continue our studies. But I think that in many ways it was our undergraduate years that prepared us for the positions we each find ourselves in now, for preparing us to deal with the often difficult choices that are posed to women and men in today's world as we attempt to make sense of our lives, try to understand how we will combine the various parts of our lives into an integrated identity. A few years ago, I had the privilege of returning to Wellesley as the commencement speaker, And there I spoke about the great gifts that women's education, and particularly women's colleges and predominantly women's universities, such as the Mount, have given to generations of women, and through them, to their families and to their larger communities. I said then, each new generation takes us into new territory. But while change is certain, progress is not. Change is a law of nature. Progress is the challenge of both a life and a society. Describing an integrated life is easier than achieving one. I believe that as strongly today as I did then. And the search for an integrated life is one of the greatest challenges confronting all of us in today's world. But it seems especially important for women to understand the challenges we face and how best we can deal with them. That is why the education of girls and women is critical, not only for the individual, but for the larger society. The President, in her remarks earlier, said that the G7 summit leaders will address a number of very critical issues to our future as neighbors, as allies, and as those who share this planet. But I think it's also important, and one of the reasons I so greatly appreciate this occasion, is to make clear that issues of concern to women, issues of social development, issues pertaining to education are not soft or marginal to economic progress. In fact, we now know that women are the key to both economic and social progress throughout our world. That is why I want to commend this university for its Women's Studies Department, its Center for Women in Science, its Child Study Center, its opportunities for open learning, which enable many women and men to continue their educations later in life. This mission is particularly urgent today. As we look around our world and as we study what is happening in our two countries, we know that there is much to be grateful for. We have made progress. But we also know that with the changing configuration of the world at the end of the post-Cold War era, we have new and difficult dilemmas to address. Many old divisions and hatreds have disappeared. Totalitarian dictatorships have given way to democracies and free market economies in country after country. The opportunities for peace and prosperity seem to be greater now than ever before. But in a world of profound change such as ours, we face the challenge of peaceful coexistence in a world that feels smaller and smaller all the time. How do we maintain our ethnic, racial, religious, geographic identities without succumbing to tension, hatred, intolerance, and bloodshed? How do we put people and their needs first, including citizens of every background, men, women, rich, poor, urban, rural, of all races and creeds? How do we enable all of our people to be full participants in our economic and political lives? So the challenges we confront are ones that are critical to the mission of this university. As I have traveled throughout my own country as well as in countries around the world, it has become even clearer to me than I knew based on my own personal experience that investing in the lives and well-being of girls and women is in many respects the quickest route to economic and social progress. Time and time again, whether one looks at indices of development Whether one reads the research carried out by such institutions as UNICEF or the World Bank, or whether one just applies one's common sense, it is clear that educating girls and women will pay off for a society much more than many other investments that are considered more hard-headed, more realistic, more likely to be successful. We know for example, that the clearest correlate with a child's educational attainment is the educational attainment of that child's mother. We know that whether we look at my country or we look at the countries I visited in South Asia. And yet we also see the tensions that earlier speakers alluded to. We know that there are fiscal constraints and budgetary battles being waged across the G7 countries. My plea, both in my own country and to the other countries represented, is to think about these concerns in light of long-term investments that are likely to pay off for generations to come. It is clear that education is still one of the most effective investments any country can make. And when times are difficult, the natural impulse to cut back across the board, including education cuts, I hope will be resisted in my country. Because if we do that, we send a signal that education, despite all of the rhetoric and the lip service, is not where we put our money. And I am hopeful that as we struggle on behalf of the priorities that we expect to address as societies moving toward the 21st century, that education will remain at the top of the list. It is especially important for women because women are struggling to, in the words of Mary Catherine Bateson, compose their lives. There still are so many of us who each day feel as though we are writing and living a new sonata, that we are attempting to bring disparate notes and harmonies and melodies together to make a tune that does some justice to the complexity of our own experience. Women are struggling to find identities for themselves, to raise their children, to make ends meet. They are also struggling against the remaining obstacles in our societies, against their opportunities to live up to the fullest of their God-given potentials. So against a rather complicated backdrop, we see even more importantly the role that education can play in helping women make the composition that is right for them. That is really, from my perspective, the goal of education today, to help equip us, to give us the tools to make the choices that are right for our own lives. My choices may be different from someone else's, but each of us, if we have had the education we need, will try to make responsible choices, recognizing that those choices may change over our lifetimes. Because the balance between family, work, and service may tilt one direction or the other at different points in the lifespan. For me, that has certainly been the case. My family responsibilities have grown and waxed and waned with the changing times, with my daughter growing up, with my parents aging, with new people coming into our relationships. But to be able to take advantage of what I've been blessed with, I know that my education has helped prepare me even there. I also know that the kind of work that one chooses, whether it is in the home, out of the home, or for most of us, a combination of the two stretching through our lives, is critical not only for our own well-being, but increasingly for that of our family and our larger community. Most students at this university will work for pay, and most already have. The non-traditional students come both from the home, come from the workplace, and come from balancing both. And to value one's work and to respect one's education because it has helped equip one for work is one of the great satisfactions of anyone's life. Service to one's community, I know, is highly valued here. That service is needed now more than ever. So many women have always performed service on behalf of their fellow citizens. Many women today feel stretched very thinly and wonder whether they will still be able to do so. We need those hands and hearts and heads more than ever. As decisions are made to try to encourage individual responsibility among people who have been dependent or vulnerable, as decisions are made to cut back on certain social services, all adults who care about the quality of life in their communities will have to become more involved in giving service to one another. That can be a transforming experience, as people at this university know so well. It certainly has for me. I feel very fortunate that I had an education that has helped prepare me. It has not provided all the answers. There is no such road in any educational experience I'm aware of. But it has given me the capacity to understand something of the history that preceded me, something of the world surrounding me, and the ability to help myself think through the challenges that I confront. It is indeed a great blessing, and one that too many in our society have taken for granted. When I did visit South Asia some weeks ago with my daughter, I was struck time and again at the sacrifices people in those democracies had paid on behalf of their ideals. It made me actually feel quite humble in the presence of people whose mothers and fathers and sons and brothers and husbands had been assassinated, and people who themselves had been exiled and tortured and imprisoned. And as I spoke with them and visited throughout those countries, what struck me over and over again is how desperate they were to educate more and more of their people. I visited schools in villages where there was no electricity, no communications, where children sat in very sparse concrete buildings working out algebra problems that were put out on the blackboard. I visited places where schools were being built as fast as they could and often just in front of forces that wanted to turn back the clock and were burning schools down as quickly as they could. And I remember asking one of the people involved in building these schools, thousands and thousands of them, primarily to educate girls, how he could keep doing it in the face of opposition that often crossed the line into arson and violence. And he looked at me with great surprise, as if to say, how could you even ask such a question? He said, we have to educate our girls. They are the future of our families, and our families are the future of our country. It was a simple but eloquent statement about what many people throughout our world are facing when they attempt to secure even a portion of the blessings we take for granted in the education systems in our two countries. So when I returned to the United States, I pondered greatly why so many in my own country not only understand and respect the sacrifices that have been made before them and for them to provide educational opportunity, but why they fail to work as hard as they can to make sure it is always available for every person who comes after, whether that person is a traditional or non-traditional student. We should be grateful for what we have in Canada and the United States, but we also must be vigilant to raise our voices on behalf of education and to raise them specifically on behalf of educating girls and women. I want to thank this university and all who support it for giving not only voice but life to that mission. It means more than probably anyone individually could ever express, and it is both a legacy and a promise that investing in the future potential of all our people is the best investment any society can make. Thank you very much.